Hey, what's up guys, aarava here, and welcome back to another episode of my F1 22 My Team Career Mode. This is episode number 46 today for the British Grand Prix in Season 3. If you guys did miss the previous episode at the Canadian GP, then be sure to go check that one out before you see this one, because we continued our streak of different winners in every single race that is run so far. So check that one out to find out who won that one. It was a bit of a chaotic one with the reigning world champion crashing out of that one at the Wall of Champions, and quite a spicy one into team battles between myself and Sebastian Vettel on the last lap. Vettel trying to re-overtake us, get the position locked up, and just about we managed to keep ahead, and he actually thankfully kept ahead at least of the car that was behind him. And some really good battles actually for the top guys, with three different teams, Ferrari, McLaren and Red Bull, fighting for that race victory. And of course, hopefully by now you have gone back and watched it. If you haven't, obviously now you'll know Verstappen won that one, his first race win of the season, and really a win he needed after two DNFs in a row at Monaco and Azerbaijan, and just generally a very rocky Season 3 for Verstappen. Albon has been the better man in that Red Bull team so far, but Max clearly still has speed within him. He's just had a bit of bad luck, a couple unfortunate races, so maybe this might be the kickstart to his season, but it remains all so close at the top. Sebastian Vettel still leads this Drivers' Championship somehow, ahead of Leclerc, who's turned quite a consistent corner with 2 second places and hands himself quite neatly ahead of both McLarens of Gasly and Lando Norris. And of course, with our race victory at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, we're slap bang in the middle, splitting those two papaya cars. So our season has begun a bit, but I think last episode felt like a bit of a reality check of where truly the pace of the car is and how far we've still got to go in terms of upgrade. And speaking of those upgrades, of course, you've seen, as I've been talking about the outlook of the championship so far this season, we have purchased another aerodynamics upgrade. We already have the DRS one pending, but now this is for the front downforce. We can't afford the rear downforce just yet, but we should be able to by the time we do the practice programs at Silverstone. But even with that, we don't actually have the capacity to do more than 2 upgrades on the aero side, because we're lacking that upgrade on the fabrication side of things. So actually right now we're just kind of holding and waiting out for that DRS upgrade to come in for the next race, and also that front downforce. But now we turn our attentions to the race weekend at hand, the British Grand Prix, my home race. So wanting to do well, of course, though, being Silverstone, of course, there is some rain lurking about, and it's going to be a wet qualifying here. Dry for the race, though, it seems. So this will just be a case of maybe some jeopardy for how far up the order we could get. So we're starting our first flying lap then, and I don't think there's any more rain to come, so it's going to be pretty stable intermediates for the entire session. But immediately at turn 1, we hit a massive issue. I simply went down 2 gears to turn the car in, you know, didn't think to chuck it in 7th gear because I was a bit too cautious. I thought, let's go down to 6th gear just in case the car doesn't turn in as well as I think it will. It did turn in quite fine, but then literally at the curb, the car got so unsettled and then just chucked me straight off to the left-hand side. So not the best way to start proceedings on the Saturday here, I will admit. So we have to go again and set some consecutive laps. Still very sketchy out there on the rear end as well. Then at the end of our, 4th lap in total this is. And then finally, it's a 5th final lap this is going to be on the track in this session to try and solidify our position. I mean, to be fair, we are P10 and 11 right there with Vettel right now, so we would get through into Q2, but I wanted to make sure, because we all know how the track evolution can be at times on this game. So across the line, and it's going to be P7, Vettel stays P11, so it actually wouldn't have mattered in the end, but just wanted to make sure, you know. But it's a very strong showing for the Red Bull guys here in the wet conditions. Maybe a good thing then for the rest of us that it'll be dry tomorrow, because otherwise maybe Red Bull would have had a massive advantage. And Mick Schumacher in the Repsol, Haas getting caught out, and Sainz just about making it through. Haas really suffering from a lack of upgrades as of late, it would seem. But it looks like, basing off that pace in the intermediate conditions, we will be fighting to get into Q3. We got a P7 there, but of course we know the track kind of gets a bit quicker. The AI get quicker as they go on through session to session. And, well, for us as the player, it's just about trying to replicate the lap time we did in Q1. But that's easier said than done, because, you know, the conditions change, your driving lines change, as you can clearly see there, getting a wash of on this there, just braking a bit too late going through that left-hander, and then before Lovefields. So definitely going to gain some time, I would say, on the second flying lap I do in this session. But this first flyer, let's just see what we can post on the board as a kind of banker lap across the line. We go quicker than Albon, one of the Red Bull cars. That's quite promising. Ocon and Gasly, though, quicker. And now, by the time we get to the end of this session, as we go through Maggots and Beckett's, the checkered flag has fallen. We've gone red in the first sector. We've gained about 2.5 to 3 tenths in the middle, and then gained a further tenth or two into the final couple of corners. We're down to P14, though. Sebastian Vettel, I believe, is in the top 10. Tsunoda and Gasly to beat across the line. Is that going to be enough? About 5 tenths gain, half a second. No, it's not. And so for our home race, we are knocked out in Q2, and we will start this home race in P11. Vettel made it through. Another shock exit is Pierre Gasly, the man who's been in some fine form for McLaren as of late, in P13 there. Both Alpines make it through, so that's a nice recovery for them off the back of a difficult Canadian Grand Prix. Both Ferraris as well, so they'll be happy, and Leclerc looking in fine form. But we now have to go to the grid and just find out how that last top 10 shootout goes, and we know we've got work to do from P11 on the grid.
We return once again then to the home of British motorsport and the birthplace of the Formula One World Championship. It's race day here at Silverstone, and it's time for the British Grand Prix. The 3.6-mile long Silverstone circuit is one of the longest of the season, with 18 corners in the current layout. With average lap speeds reaching around 145 miles per hour, it's also one of the quickest tracks of the year. Watch out for cars taking the right-handers of Abbey and of Copse flat out. Before we begin, let's take a quick look at the grid lineup for today's race. Charles Leclerc lines up on pole position, and Max Verstappen lines up alongside. Moving on to the rest of the grid, we have Albon, Russell, Lando Norris, and Perez. Ocon, Hamilton, Vettel, and Oscar Piastri. The owner-driver, Sainz, Pierre Gasly, and Tsunoda. Schwartzman, Bottas, Mick Schumacher, and Kevin Magnussen. Drugovich, Stroll, Liam Lawson, and Théo Pourchaire. It's almost time for those 5 red lights to go out then. Let's see who can prevail today. And I'm joined once again by Anthony Davidson to bring you the lowdown for today's race. Let's have a chat about McLaren. What do you make of their performance so far this season?
Well, the atmosphere within that team seems very positive at the moment. Everyone seems like they're in great spirits and having a lot of fun doing what they do, and that's definitely contributed to the performances we've seen.
So it looks like in the end, well and truly, I wasn't actually too far off the pace from Sebastian Vettel. He only qualified in P9, so he's the car directly ahead of me. So, as I said, that's really where the car is in real terms now. If you kind of, there was no funny business, no wacky kind of, shock kind of exits, apart from Gasly, you would say, in that qualifying session. So, like Canada, we are again met with this battle with Oscar Piastri and our teammate Vettel and Hamilton even, because Hamilton's only just ahead of Sebastian. So familiar fighting maybe at the start of this race for the British GP. Leclerc, though, what a stonking performance for him. For Piastri to be P10 and him on pole position, just showing the pace difference from Piastri to him. Only obviously Piastri's second season ever in Formula One in this alternate F1 universe of ours. So still much to learn and much growth for him as an individual driver. But Leclerc does very well to get ahead of the 2 Red Bull cars. And so it may be Leclerc versus Verstappen, just like it has been sometimes in real life and was the case in Season 1 of this career mode series. That fight may be reignited in this episode. It's all dry, so I think everyone's going to be flat out and it's going to be a real tough fight. You've got so many different teams up there ahead of us. Alpine, Ferrari, McLaren, Red Bull, ourselves with Audi, Mercedes as well, because Russell's up there too. So this could be quite a tasty one. All of us, apart most of us on this grid, you can see choosing to go with the soft compound. Sainz behind me on the mediums, and then a couple of others in the Alfa Romeo and Williams teams going for medium tyres. But the rest of us thinking we can maybe pull off a soft tyre to medium or soft tyre to hard compound one stop. In the past on this game, I've actually felt more comfortable, ironically, on the hard compound around Silverstone, because you can lean on the tyre more, and because the track abrasion's so high, the hard compound actually rubbers in a bit quicker. So I think I'm going to opt for the hard compound. I reckon a couple of the cars ahead of me will go for medium, so we've just got to keep fingers crossed that maybe their tyres wear out a bit more towards the end of this race. So this may be a bit of a slow burner, but let's see where we end up by the end of it. And let's hope we can take some of that home crowd energy and use it to power us up the grid as we go to 5 red lights to the British Grand Prix. Lights out, and away we go at Silverstone. It's a really slow getaway on the soft tyres. Even Sainz on the mediums almost gets me to turn 1. We just about managed to survive that. Get to the apex of turn 1 to be in P11 still. Piastri locking up. We go down the inside of Village. Sainz, though, hits us on the right-hand side, and we have damage, minor floor damage, and we get pinched in with a 3-wide moment. Piastri managed to wrangle his Ferrari down the inside. Sainz goes dancing around the outside of both of us, and we have to now fight Piastri again and try and go down the inside now for the next left-hander. Sainz, though, ahead of us. We're going to squeeze Piastri out into left field, trying to use the soft tyre to our advantage to try and go round the outside, and it's going to be a real lovely move if we can finish this off round the outside mid-apex. And on the exit, the Haas actually has a good run and clearly has a bit of straight line speed, using a bit of ERS though, able to get in front and be P9, and be P10 by the time we get to Copse and go through Maggot and Beckett. But that was a real tough start to the race in Village, and unfortunately we picked up a bit of floor damage. It's only minor because I can hardly see any of the damage on the heads-up display. It's like lime green, so that won't affect us too much if hopefully we keep our nose clean for the remainder of this race. But some stern fighting going on with Piastri and Sainz. The Ferrari does get back ahead, so it was a pretty quick getaway for the Haas, but eventually the soft tyre advantage will pay out. But it's Leclerc who still leads the way then, ahead of Verstappen, Albon, Norris, Ocon in the Alpine flying high in P5, ahead of Russell, and the other Alpine of Sergio Perez ahead of my teammate Sebastian Vettel. But it's going to be Verstappen versus Leclerc then at the sharp end once DRS is activated, but we don't need any DRS to have a run on Lewis Hamilton, diving down the inside, narrowly missing the wall as we try and get as tight as we can to the apex to avoid any contact with Lewis. On the inside of Magnet Beckett, though, we do make a little bit of contact. We use the curb like a skateboard ramp and just grind across it, and just about manage to make that overtake. And in the aftermath, Lewis is a bit flustered, and Piastri will go down the inside in the Ferrari and get the position for P10. So Hamilton outside the points now on lap 2, and it just isn't going well for the reigning champion. Very much like previous F1 games, F1 2021, 2020, it seems like now, Season 3, that usual region where, for whatever reason in my career mode series, Lewis Hamilton just dips in performance. It's been a very tough, long season for him. Meanwhile, we've got Lando Norris, the other Brit in this race, fighting his fellow compatriot, the Thai Brit driver Alexander Albon. The two side by side after Albon locked up into that right-hander at Village, and the McLaren is up into P3. And if Albon is not careful, Ocon might just go sailing around the outside of him and maybe even Lando. No, just going to be him. But Ocon, that's a really good overtake for the Alpine. The Alpine taking the fight to one of the top teams in Formula 1 and doing very well indeed. Meanwhile, Verstappen keeping up with Leclerc, and both of them pulling away from the pack behind with a 2.2 gap. So once the DRS, well, it's activated this lap, so I imagine sooner rather than later, Verstappen may come knocking on Leclerc's Ferrari door. And the same can be said of Sebastian Vettel versus Sergio Perez. Vettel, can he get past Perez on this straight now? It's a good exit. DRS opens. Perez does not have any DRS from the car ahead, so it should be a pretty easy overtake for Seb. On the outside, the two jockey for position, though. We know from Baku the Alpines are pretty damn good in straight line, but Vettel is able to get that overtake done. He's up into P7, and now leaves us to have a go at Sergio Perez. And meanwhile, for the race lead, Verstappen down the inside on Leclerc. The Red Bull is going to get the lead. He squeezes Leclerc nearly completely off circuit with the elbow out in front of the crowd at Village, and is up into P1. And Leclerc now will be the one chasing, as we are chasing and trying to keep up with Perez. One of us pushing him through these corners basically and rear-ending him almost, such as the pace difference. And Perez struggling for some race pace early on in this race compared to his teammate Ocon, who is flying high in the top 5. Perez with DRS open, but it won't matter because we brake later than him and go dancing around his outside to the inside for Luffield, and we're into P8. And Perez is actually struggling so much that Piastri has got down his inside there. So maybe, I don't know, maybe there's an issue for Checo, maybe in the car, mechanical issue that's hampering him for a couple of laps temporarily. We know that the AI can have those kind of issues, and it seems like it because Piastri makes light work of him, really light work of him, and gets up into P9. And meanwhile, there's a fight now brewing between Gasly and Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton struggling now for pace on these soft tyres. Remember, the soft compound really isn't a durable tyre in most circuits, so the fact that most of us have chosen this compound is a bit surprising, and maybe some individuals are getting caught out. Gasly looking to make a charge, having been knocked out in Q2 on Saturday. He needs to get in this clean air to now close that 2.9 second gap. And speaking about closing the gap, well, Leclerc is closing up to Verstappen, but look at the gap to Norris and Ocon behind, and even Albon and Russell. This may become a 6-car fight from P1 to P6, but the fight for P1 right now is between Leclerc and Verstappen. Leclerc round the outside of Verstappen, Norris defending and going and keeping round the outside of Esteban Ocon, and behind Albon staying ahead of Russell. So you've got kind of 3 individual 2-man fights. Leclerc gets the better of Verstappen this time. Ocon unable to do the same versus Lando Norris as the McLaren stays firm. But now that McLaren may actually creep up to the back of Verstappen. Verstappen's going to go for the move to try and repass Leclerc. Dives down the inside. Leclerc is going to defend this quite well, and it looks like may just stay ahead on the run down to the hill. So in stark contrast, Leclerc is able to actually defend Verstappen successfully for once. For once though, because the second time he comes knocking again on lap 7, this time you can clearly see he's got so much more overspeed and gets ahead with a little bit of a drift for good measure. But now pretty much the top 4 are nose to tail through these last couple of corners. 4 different teams: Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren and Alpine. And meanwhile, whilst all this has been going on, I've been under pressure by Piastri, lacking a bit of race pace on these soft tyres versus Sebastian Vettel, unable to close up. Gasly though is closing up to Perez now finally on lap 8 in Village, and he's going to go for a wonderful round the outside pass on that left-hander. That's such an unorthodox way to make an overtake there. Usually you dive down the inside, but Gasly's making it work. He's into the points for the first time in this race, and Sainz now has entered the frame, and he's going to overtake Checo as well. So now potentially Sainz may be one of the quickest cars on the circuit, with those mediums being the better race tyre at this phase of the GP. The softs really wearing out, and I am feeling the soft tyre wear compared to my AI compatriot, because we are going to come in for a pit stop. Only Leclerc and Russell are going to join me. So yeah, once again, kind of getting caught out with, although technically maybe the numbers are saying this was the better strategy for the AI, for me as the player, I just can't keep up with the tyre wear levels versus the AI around me, and we're in. But to be fair, Leclerc and Russell have also pulled the trigger. They're in. They have put on a set of hard tyres, so I'm going to do the same as I plan to the entire time. There's a mistake though on the front left. No, guys, come on. Oh, give me a break. So now we've lost quite a bit of time there, because Schumacher was nowhere near me, and now he's right up behind me coming down this pit lane. So we might have to do some re-overtaking moves, maybe on the likes of Piastri, who was behind me just before entering the pit. So, I mean, I can't blame the team too much. These things happen sometimes. We just get our heads down now and go again. But there's a wash of understeer on these hards immediately, because it does take about a lap or 2 to heat them up. You've seen that in F1 esports as well. Meanwhile, in my teammates' world, Vettel with acres of clean space ahead of him and behind, but it looks like he's going a bit slowly, you know, and I think he's got an issue. He is definitely going slow, and that might just be Vettel's first non-points finish this season. The consistency has come to an end because Sebastian Vettel is out of this Grand Prix. It's the first DNF mechanical issue for our car this season on either end, because of course the 2 times we've had some non-points finishes, we've still actually managed to finish the race, or we chose to retire the car by our own accord. So that's the first time our car has failed, either myself or Sebastian. Bit of a shame to do it at the British Grand Prix. Seb, known to love Silverstone, but that's a real shame. That's going to be a big shame also for him in the championship. That blows this championship wide open for Leclerc. The 2 McLarens of Norris and Gasly as well, although I don't know how much Gasly will be able to capitalise on this. Now back to our race. There is still a race at hand for our side of the garage, and we're going to overtake Perez for the 2nd time in this Grand Prix. Hard tyre versus the medium, so there really must be an issue with Perez's car, because he's on a quicker compound, and we make light work of it, but we close up now to someone on the same compound, Piastri, and for the 2nd time this race we overtake the Australian and get up into what is P15 right now. But that's because a bunch of people are still yet to make their pit stops. I think that round of pit stops is happening right now, as we can see Pourchaire in the pits. Then Tsunoda is going to continue going on. I think he's one of the few people that started on medium tyres. Gasly's in. He's put on the mediums, Pierre Gasly has, and he's actually ahead of us. So Gasly, having recovered already a little bit in this Grand Prix, actually comes out ahead of us. So that actually shows how much of an issue that slow pit stop was, because, well, Gasly was miles back from me. But we're going to look to try and jump him straight away, of course, out of the pit lane. Even those medium tyres will need a little bit of heating up, and so with DRS aided up into P13, and we'll now look to chase after Tsunoda, the next car up on the road, and then there's quite a hefty 7.6 second gap to Russell. We pounce down the inside of the Japanese driver, who I believe is going to come in anyway on this lap, so it's a bit futile. But at the sharp end, Lando Norris leads the way. One of the home favourites leads the British Grand Prix. Leclerc is being overtaken by Ocon. Ocon with the medium compounder tyre, as you can clearly see, so he's going to have a bit better pace at this point of the race. And, you know, Leclerc and Russell, along with myself, us 3 drivers, we've taken the gamble of going on the hards and hoping by the end of the race it'll come back towards us. But at this stage, Verstappen, Norris, Ocon, Albon, all on the mediums, so they're going to be the quicker cars. As you can clearly see, this is the biggest visual representation of the difference between the medium and the hards right now, and Leclerc is actually really struggling to get to grips with those hards, because he gets overtaken by not only Albon and Ocon, but also Russell through Luffield because of a twitch on the rear end. So the top 4 drivers all on medium, but there's actually a pattern within this top 6 as well of when they made their pit stop. So Leclerc and Russell, P5 and 6, they pit earliest of everyone onto hard tyres. Then it was Lando Norris and Verstappen who pit on the very next lap for the medium compounds. They're 1 and 2. Verstappen now trying to make a move to retake the lead from the McLaren, who is the one now fighting him for victory here at Silverstone. And he does make light work of him. But will Lando come back? Oh, Verstappen has to go defensive. And Lando goes round the outside to try and get him back. That is a very, very late lunge for him. And Verstappen had to go so defensive to keep him at bay, and it's going to be potentially the home crowd roaring as into turn 1. Lando gets back up into P1, but as I was saying, Albon and Ocon, they also have pit onto mediums, but crucially, they went 1 lap longer than Lando and Verstappen, so that is why they've fallen away in comparison. But it doesn't mean they're not going to give us an equally exciting fight. Albon locking up into Village, and Ocon having a little look. Didn't quite work out this time though. DRS open down to the next left-hander on the inside, so close from making contact with each other. Ocon trying to go around the outside, but now Leclerc's entered the frame. He's overtaken Russell, and maybe finally the Ferrari's hard tyres have fired up, because Leclerc comes back at Ocon. So Ocon was looking to make an overtake, and instead is defending this instead, and Leclerc getting his elbows out, bit of contact made on the exit of Copse. Ocon is going to remain in P4, and now Russell Russell gets back through on Leclerc. Oh, what a fight through Maggots and Beckett's. Mercedes v Ferrari, Russell v Leclerc, and Russell comes out on top. This is turning into an absolute classic British Grand Prix, and there's still more fighting again as we cut on just in time to see Verstappen have a go, but a failed attempted overtake for P1. The McLaren holds strong so far. Lap 19, Leclerc coming back at George Russell, but these two ought to actually try and protect their tyres because everyone is bunching up, because look at the time gaps. Ocon and Albon have now closed up to Verstappen and Lando. Leclerc and Russell not too far. Even I'm only 1 second off, so we've quietly closed up as this becomes a 7-car train led by Lando Norris. Now Verstappen coming at him, but Albon's there too, and it's going to be 3 wide into Stowe. Albon down the inside of both of them. What an overtake from Alexander Albon. He's come through with a smash and grab overtake through the final 2 corners and now leads the British Grand Prix ahead of Norris and Verstappen. Ocon, Leclerc, Russell, and now myself are there. I'm there with Russell. We can even make a move on the Mercedes car into Village. We're going to go for the dive bomb down the inside on the right-hander up into P6. We've even set the fast lap of the Grand Prix whilst we've been closing up to this entire pack, because I was the only car in clean air. These guys have been losing time hand over fist to each other, basically. And basically, the reason why you didn't see a lot of me in that entire race up until now is because I was just getting my head down and just doing the best lap times I could to close up to these guys. But now, just like them, we're stuck in this DRS train. We're trying to break it, and we will with a bit of ERS usage. It's a big lunge into Village again. Leclerc tries his best to keep it through. He does keep it through on the inside, and we narrowly miss making a bit of contact. It's a real hardly fought contest between us 3 hard tyre runners, because Russell's in the mix now with DRS, and he's going to use my rear wing to get a bit of a tow to get ahead of the Ferrari. Leclerc obviously a bit of a sitting duck at that point with no DRS off anyone as Ocon and Verstappen break away. So we've again got 3 different groups. We've got Albon and Norris at the sharp end. They've broken away 1.7 seconds to Verstappen and Ocon, who are in their own little battle, and then myself, Russell and Leclerc, all 3 of us on the hard compound. It's lap 23. At this point, you gotta hope that the medium tyre is starting to wear. So now we're leading that pack of hard tyre runners. I'm hoping we can use the clean air to close back up to Ocon and Verstappen, and then do what Leclerc failed to do and actually go and overtake them whilst their tyres wear out a bit more. Speaking of, Ocon down the inside of Verstappen. Ocon versus Verstappen. This will be a bit of a cagey affair. Ocon gets ahead, Verstappen down to P5, and Leclerc gets back ahead of Russell, but those two are keeping up with me. And so just like sometimes in the past where I've used AI to pull me along, Leclerc and Russell are going to use me to get pulled along as we all close up to Verstappen versus Ocon. That's going to go again as Verstappen now tries to re-overtake the Frenchman. Unsuccessful though. The Alpine remains strong, and we're now right up here. We almost career into the back of Verstappen. We lock up as the tyres get on the curb, and Leclerc now is able to sail around the outside. It is all kicking off in that last sector here at Silverstone, and even my hard tyres are a bit worn out. Look at the bottom right. The icon is pretty much nearly red there, so probably Leclerc and Russell are in the same boat. So even though us 3 probably have an advantage on the medium tyre runners, we're also facing difficulties with traction. Albon and Lando, though, they're pulling out a massive lead now for 1 and 2. Albon leading, and Norris comes in. He comes in for a late pit stop. Verstappen comes in for a late pit stop as we now shoot one down the inside and return the favour on Leclerc and do the exact same move he did to us on the outside across the line for a brand new lap, the last lap of the Grand Prix. We squeeze Leclerc into turn 1, get to the apex first, and Russell follows us through to get up into P4. We now all of a sudden are in a podium position. Norris and Verstappen fearful of a puncher. They've come in late, but we have really got no grip at all. Understeer, oversteer, everything through Village, and Russell gets a beautiful exit through the left-hander. DRS also aided as well. I'm a sitting duck with my rear wing closed firmly shut, and we only just managed to slot in behind Russell as we squeeze Leclerc out. He's struggling as well, and Gasly, of all people, has come through up into P5. He's been nowhere this entire race, and now all of a sudden he's in a top 5 position as we have a go at Russell to try and get this podium back down the inside of Copse, just like with Hamilton earlier, but we'll keep to the right-hand side. Russell swipes across though, makes a bit of contact with us. We're going to try and get our nose in, but he's got the better racing line. We cut in tighter. Russell's brake checked us in the middle of Maggots and Beckett's, and it's a disaster. On the last lap, we've lost our front wing. We're still going in this race though, and we could still finish in P5 maybe, but we've got no front wing. Gasly up into P4. It's a messy and controversial end to the British Grand Prix, and it's not over yet. Leclerc with the front wing going for a move. We go defensive to the inside, double lock up, and now Leclerc's hit us and T-boned us as we go nearly straight on. We spin the car around, and we're desperately trying to get this thing going to still finish up in P5 ahead of the Ferrari. Leclerc will be very annoyed with that, but I was a passenger in that brake zone with the double lock-up, no front wing, and I broke way too late to try and defend the corner basically, and I was gonna go straight on into the gravel trap, and actually Leclerc saved me by hitting me because he spun me round instead of me going straight on and losing that position completely. So a very messy end, but through all of it, Alexander Albon keeps his medium tyres in check to finish P1 and get his first victory for Red Bull Honda. Back-to-back wins for Red Bull. Ocon and Russell on the podium.
Plenty of action here at Silverstone. A memorable race and an impressive victory. And talk to me. What do you think it was that sealed the win for them?
Well, this was a real team victory. They put together a solid strategy today that appeared well suited to the conditions out on track. The driver did everything that was expected of them in the moment to really execute the team's plan to perfection. A shining example of how F1 really is a team sport.
Here come today's winners. The team at Red Bull have done a phenomenal job recently, and it's clear to see that they've put in the work, and they should be so proud of the victory they've secured here.
Well, through a very messy end to a British Grand Prix, Albon shines through with, some perseverance and some tyre whispering, really, on the medium tyres, because Lando Norris and Verstappen had to pit late on because they were worried about a puncher. Albon and Ocon kept it steady, and they get a 1 and 2 respectively because of it. Russell gets a bit of a controversial P3 because I really feel like he brake checked us in Maggots and Beckett's. Then separately, in a different incident, I then made a bit of a howler. I just tried to brake way too late. I should have realised that I was always going to lock up that much going at that speed into a downhill corner. But obviously, whilst you're racing, you're just focused on trying to stay ahead of your competitor. We almost locked up and went straight on if it wasn't for Leclerc basically turning into me and spinning me rather than letting me go by. Really, in hindsight, Leclerc actually could have just broken a bit more and just watched me go straight on and then turned in, but of course he was trying to get the absolute maximum out of the brake zone for himself, and so we stay ahead, and there were no penalties awarded for any of that. So the FI really taking true the mantra of just let them race, it would seem, at the end of this race. And so with Albon's victory, he now is level on points with Sebastian Vettel in the Drivers' Championship, leads the way on a technicality of some kind. Gasly P3, Leclerc down to P4. Only 4 points though covering those top 4 positions, and 4 different teams as well. Red Bull, Audi, McLaren and Ferrari. It really is a lovely, lovely sight. Then a bit of a gap to the pack behind, which I'm leading now, surprisingly, so showing our resurgence and kind of, we're slowly growing into this season, but that 14 point gap showing there's still some work to do. And really, you know, if it wasn't for Vettel's DNF, you know, the mechanical failure, we probably, I think, would have been stuck behind Vettel because we showed no race pace versus him on the soft compound. Maybe on the hard it would have been different, and, you know, just who knows how that race would have panned out with Sebastian in there, and if Lando and Max had kept their tyres in check. But either way, it was a very enthralling Grand Prix. Guys, if you have enjoyed that one, hit the like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you're around here, then do get subscribed for weekly Formula 1 content. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.